Hello, let me introduce myself. My name is David Kemp, and I hope this is the first of many briefings that I get to send to the great Illinois ministerial team. And it'll be nothing fancy. Hopefully it won't be long, but I hope to do this every week. I'm sure I'll miss a few weeks, but from time to time. But every week I hope to touch base with you, send it out on Thursday, and then it'll be posted for everyone on my Saturday briefing on my blog. But it's just a little way of me touching base, and I can't see everybody every day or every week. And so this is a way that at least we can kind of connect. And so anyway, it's not going to be fancy. I just record this right off my phone and upload it to YouTube, and then send the link over to Sister Mindy, and she emails it out. But it is a way for me to say hello. And so the first thing I want to do, and over the next couple weeks, this may be a good format for me to do this. It's John Maxwell who said everything rises and falls in leadership. And then he defines leadership, and he says leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. And I can buy into that. I can agree with that. But I do think that over the long haul, that everything rises and falls on relationship. And you can have a great leader for a while, but if there's not a good relationship there, then the lack of relationship will sabotage that leader's ability to be effective. And so I think you have a right to know who your administrative bishop is. I don't want to come in and just try to lead from this desk that I'm privileged to sit behind and use a title, hang a title over us. I'd like to think that I earned the right through having a relationship with you, that I earned that right through us being colleagues and brothers and sisters together, church family together, as we work to fulfill the Great Commission. So I'm going to walk you through a little bit on my Saturday briefing for a while on my story, on who Sanj and I are. And I may have her to do a video or two as well to introduce herself. But so anyway, let me just start today, and I'll be very brief, but I'll give you it all started in my early 20s, late teens. I'd have to go back and really drill down, but I would probably have been about 18 or 19 years old when I really accepted the call of God on my life. I suspected that God had called me early on. I remember as a young boy knowing that one day that I would be a preacher. That was just a part of my life. And everybody's story is different. Yours don't have to be like mine. But I remember my dad was pastoring in a little town in the southeast of South Carolina, a little town called Hamer. And that little church, I remember going back in the Sunday school room where I went to Sunday school as a boy. And they had, I don't know if you remember those chairs that had like grass or something, that the bottoms were made out of grass or something they had knitted or weaved together, and like a basket. And anyway, I remember kneeling down in front of that chair, and I'm sure all of heaven chuckled and laughed a little bit at my prayer. But the sum of it is, okay, God, like I was doing him a favor. Okay, God, I'm going to do this. I'm going to surrender my life to you, and I'm going to accept the call of God your call on my life, and I'm going to become a preacher. But I don't want to do little things. That was just my heart. I want to pastor a great church. I want to make a difference, and I was just going to change the world. And I was putting all these conditions on God and telling him what I'll do this. Like, I was doing God a favor, and God really needed me. But I was a kid. But I had that passion in my heart that I wanted to do great things for God. And so I surrendered my life to him. And I remember going and telling my dad, Dad, I want you to know, my dad is a retired minister. He was pastoring at that time. And I said, Dad, I want you to know that I have accepted God's call on my life. And Dad looked at me, and he didn't say, congratulations, I'm proud of you. He just looked at me. He said, son, can you do anything else? And secretly, Mom and Dad always wanted me to be a preacher. They felt like that there was a call on my life, but they went out of their way not to call me, to make it something that they did. It had to be my idea. And so he looked at me and he said very solemnly, he said, "Son, is there anything else you can do?" And man, has God held me to this. I said, "No, Dad, there's nothing else I can do." And literally to this day, so I will need your help, but literally to this day, I have trouble sometimes changing a light bulb. There's very few things that I can do, but I do know in my heart of hearts that God called me into the ministry. And I want to start there. If I'm going to be a leader in some small way in your life and in the state of Illinois for the Church of God, and I'm going to be an associate, a colleague, you've got to have the peace and the assurance that this man is called by God. And of course, my life and time will have to tell the tale. But I do think that that's where it all starts for all of us, is knowing that we know that God called us. And I'll talk more about this later as I kind of give each chapter of my life to kind of introduce myself. But there was one thing that Sonja and I've done all kinds of things as a pastor to try to feed my family. I've spent many years being bivocational, and there was other times that I was tempted by, I've always said, if the devil can't starve you out of the ministry, he'll bless you out of the ministry. There was one time that I really prospered at a secular job and was tempted to step out of the ministry and pursue the American dream. But there's one thing that kept me through all of this, and that is that I always saw myself as a minister of the gospel. I remember my first church. I was so excited to get my first church, and I'll talk more about this later. But when I got there and the realities hit and I had to feed a family, I ended up working at a little mom and pop grocery store in that little small town. It's called Saluda, South Carolina. It was in South Carolina, called Saluda. And here I am working in this little small town, this little mom and pop grocery store. And I had all these high hopes and dreams, and I was going to save the world, and I was so thrilled to have my own church. And within a few weeks, here I am, just a bag boy at the grocery store. And I was so disappointed. I was so downhearted. And I remember thinking all of this, and now all I am is a bag boy. And the Lord said, "No, you've never stopped. My call is still on your life." And I remember one day I was changing the olive section, and I was changing the prices of all the little olive bottles. And my life had been reduced to that little cabinet of olive bottles, and I was changing like a penny or something. That's back in the day when you had to use fingernail polish, if any of you ever worked at a grocery store. And I used fingernail polish. I was cleaning off the tops of the cans, and then you had like a ratchet thing, and you'd stamp the price. And my whole life in ministry had been reduced to that little olive. My whole life was defined by that little olive section. And I remember the Lord, not in an audible voice, but that still small voice, the Lord spoke to me. I was so discouraged. And the Lord spoke to me. He said, "Son, if you'll take care of what's right in front of you, I'll take care of the rest." And so that day, it's like God gave me a peace. I am not a bag boy. I'm a preacher working at a grocery store to feed my family temporarily. And this is right now, this is what I got to do. But I'm going to never stop being a preacher. And there's been many crossroads in my life. But one thing that's kept me and got me here to Illinois is that I never stopped seeing myself first and foremost as a preacher of the gospel. And brothers and sisters, I am absolutely convinced. I used to teach this at South Carolina. I did a lesson every year. The director of ministerial development was kind enough to bring me in, and I would speak to them. And I did this lesson about the call on their life. And there's two defining moments in your life that the devil can keep backing you up. To whoever's listening to this later, if you know that God has saved you, the devil can back you up and life can knock you down, but eventually you'll bump up into that moment where you accepted Christ as your personal Savior. And you hold on to that. Don't let anything else. All the other stuff can fall by the wayside, but that's the one thing that'll get you to heaven. But those of us that's in the ministry, you're going to go through tough times. There's going to be moments when you're going to, what am I doing? Why am I having to do this? But always bump up against that moment. Just like me in that little small Sunday school room in a little small church in Hamer, South Carolina. I didn't know all the things and I didn't have it all together. But I knew in my heart of hearts that God had called me, and I surrendered to that call. And don't ever surrender that surrender. Don't ever give up, brothers and sisters. Whatever you're going through today, the one thing that's going to keep us is that we know that first and foremost, I am a minister of the gospel. Husbands and wives, to the pastor's wives, or pastor spouses, whatever the case, you two are in this together. And you may not feel that same sense of direct call, but when you align yourself together as a team, as we say down south, y'all are called. And don't ever surrender that surrender the day that you surrendered your life into the ministry for the Lord Jesus Christ. So anyway, that's where it all began as a young man, and that's where it all begins for all of us. So I love you and honor you, and I look forward to meeting you personally, but next week I'll send out the next chapter. But in the meantime, as Paul said, let's run to win. We're in this race for the gospel's sake. Let's give it our best this week. I pray that you have a great weekend, and we love to travel. We'll be seeing you around the bend sooner or later. Godspeed. Bless you.